That's why we have Pastor Jimmy today here to help you and help us stay happy. That's why we want him here, and his products we're going to talk about later.
And that's why we have our children here, so that they...
Well, so they don't go through what we went through.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to my channel. If you're coming back again, thank you so much for always coming to check the videos I've posted. Thank you for clicking on that notification bell so that you get notified anytime I post a new video. If you're new here, kindly consider subscribing, because I post videos, at least a video daily. That's my goal, just for our edification, so that we can be able to grow together. So in my previous videos, I've been learning from Hinn. He visited in Kenya, and I'm just trying to understand what is it that he teaches, all the controversies around his life, his divorce with his wife. But I'm happy because of what I've been learning about him and how God restored their marriage. And in my previous video, I posted a video where he was undergoing marital counseling with Pastor Jimmy Evans, and this is the second episode where he gets to learn some laws that he ought to follow so that they can continue enjoying their marriage with his wife Susan Hinn. So welcome, and let's get to hear what Jimmy Evans is teaching Hinn. You're welcome.
That's all yours, sir.
Well, let me go to Genesis 2 if I could, because God never creates anything chaotic.
This is amazing.
And He never creates anything.
Pastor Jimmy Evans is sharing.
And God creates we know God created the universe on laws. People. You know, the physical laws, the laws of physics of the universe, thermodynamics, laws of gravity, and all of those things which give the universe order, which give life order. Okay. But what we see today in marriage is it makes a lot of people afraid. Because it's like, well, if I get into that, maybe it'll fail, maybe it'll fall, maybe, you know, all these things are going to happen and there's nothing we can do about it. But marriage is very orderly in God's way. And so in Genesis 2, God created Eve for Adam, and He said something. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, will cleave unto his wife. They two shall become one flesh, and the man and his wife are both naked and unashamed. Those are laws. Those are the 4 laws of marriage. And the first law of marriage is the law of priority. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and the word there in the Hebrew is azab. It just literally means let go of. Not to abuse your parents, but only for marriage do you have to reprioritize the blood bond of your family. Before you get married, your parents, well, you've heard the saying that blood's thicker than water.
Yeah.
Well, spirit's thicker than blood. Wow. And so Jesus said, what God has joined together, let not man put asunder. Okay, so remember now, Adam and Eve didn't have a mother. So when God said a man shall leave his mother and father, we know He wasn't just saying it to them, He was saying it to all the human race. Okay, so for this cause a man shall let go of the most important thing in his life for the sake now of this marriage. Marriage only works in first place, in real terms. Karen and I got married. I played golf all the time. I was working or golfing. And it ruined our marriage. Okay, and so I would come in, Karen would be furious, and I just didn't. And I would tell her that I loved her, and I wanted that to convey to her, "You're first." Well, it didn't, because in real terms, my friends in golf were first. What healed our marriage was when I hung up my golf clubs, and I put her first. Marriage only works in first place. That's the way that God created it. But in practical terms, we put friends first, we put children first, and children are a blessing, but children can't come before your marriage. Okay, children are not as important as your marriage for 2 reasons. Number one is they're a temporary assignment. Okay, they come and they go. I mean, I remember when they put the babies into my hands. I remember when I gave them away at the wedding. Okay, they're still a part of my family, but they don't want you following them along. You know, they want their own life. Okay, they're still precious, but they come and they go. Second, how are they going to succeed at marriage if they don't see us succeed in marriage? Okay, so our marriage is a priority. The second law of marriage, it says, and a man will cleave unto his wife. The word cleave there is the word dabak in the Hebrew, and it means to pursue with all your energy. Marriage is work. And a lot of people have the romantic misconception that if I marry the right person, I shouldn't have to work at it. In fact, if I'm having to work at it, it must mean I didn't find my soulmate. So I better get on the internet and surf around and, you know, match in 1,100 categories so I know I married my soulmate. If you marry your perfect soulmate, they're all messed up. You're naturally incompatible, and you're going to have to work at the relationship. Marriage is work, and when you work at it, it works. And the way you fall in love is you work at it. I was a 16-year-old kid, worked for Scrub Dub Car Wash, had a 1968 Dynamic 88 Oldsmobile that had been completely totaled by my mother and then given to me. And I was an idiot. but I loved Karen. I thought she was the most beautiful girl at school. So I asked her to go to a Three Dog Night concert with me, and I went to pick her up, and I knocked myself out. And she went back out with me again. I knocked myself out. And I did that until I knew I had her, and then I became a jerk and took her for granted. We fall in love because we work at it. And we fall out of love because we take each other for granted and we stop working at it. We've been married for 40 years and we still work at it, but it's a good kind of work. And in every other area of life, we know we're going to have to work at it. We know we're going to have to invest ourselves to get a return. But in marriage, somehow we think it's a romantic misconception. God never told us that. In the very beginning, He said to men, and by the way, notice He said men. He said, men, you pursue your wives. The man will, He says, leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife. And so from the very beginning, God told us the truth. Marriage is work. Okay. The third law of marriage, it says they two shall become one flesh. You have to share everything in marriage. Marriage is about sharing. Karen and I never make a decision unless we make it together. We don't, marriage is about sharing. It's not about, living your life in the same house, but you're two completely different individuals, and you have one life and the other person has another life. Is we share everything. We share the kids, we share decisions, we share the money, we share everything. And so a lot of people today get married with a prenuptial agreement. And they enter into marriage saying, there's something I'm not going to give you. It's just it's a death sentence to the marriage.
Exactly.
Because what we're saying is, the only way that two things can become one is total surrender. Is if I'm willing to take everything I have, and you're willing to give everything you have, and we surrender together, it becomes one. But when we don't do that, you just literally have two people living in the same house. It doesn't work that way. Anything that you won't give your spouse, they'll resent. And it will divide the relationship. And so everything that I have belongs to you, and it's under the authority of God, but we share everything. Fourth law of marriage is the man and his wife are both naked and unashamed. It's the law of purity. God made marriage to be the most intimate place on earth of relationship. But intimacy can only occur in an atmosphere of total trust. The word there for naked in the Garden of Eden was arom. They were completely exposed to each other mentally, physically, emotionally, in every single way, but there was no fear of that exposure because they had total trust of each other until sin came into the relationship. And when sin came into the relationship, they did not take responsibility for it. Adam turned and accused Eve. Eve accused the devil. The original sin of marriage is blame transfer. Is rather than taking responsibility, and what happened is they began to hide themselves from each other, and they could no longer experience intimacy. So the fourth law of marriage is I've got to be careful about my behavior and take responsibility for where I've made a mistake. And in 3 years of dating, in the first 3 years of our marriage, I never said I was wrong.
People don't do that.
Every time we had a problem, I blamed it on her and convinced her that it was her fault. And I was an idiot.
I was doing that to her. And now I don't, I think.
Well, and then Karen was completely closed off to me. And when I repented to her and we began to, interact in the next few weeks, she began to say things to me. And I would say, how long have you been thinking that? She'd say, oh, years. Why didn't you tell me? She said, I couldn't trust you. And so my wife was completely covered because of my sins. So in the very beginning, God said, for this cause, a man has to prioritize his wife above everything else in his life. You've got to work at this relationship. You've got to share everything, and you've got to be careful about the way you act. And when you do something wrong, you have to take responsibility for it. Those are the four foundational laws of marriage. And when you do it that way, it works every single time.
So the first law is the law of priority. The second law is the law of pursuing. You have to pursue your wife every day because marriage is work, and if you work at it, it's going to work for you. Then that one is the law of sharing. You ought to share everything with your wife or your husband to become one. So meaning you have to share everything that you have. And then the fourth law that Pastor Jimmy Evans has shared is the law of nakedness. Like you can't, or rather purity, that you are supposed to be open with each other. If someone wrongs, you don't have to be afraid to take ownership and take responsibility of your behaviors and work on them. This is the law of purity. So those are very great lessons, and I think that's what Pastor Benny is saying. He wished he knew these, or rather he wished he had met Pastor Jimmy Evans before he first married Susie Hinn. Otherwise they wouldn't have ended up in divorce. Probably he wouldn't have made the mistakes that he made during their marriage of over 30 years. But we thank God that finally he restored them, and I thank God even for their humility to fight for their marriage. So thank you so much for sticking around to this last few moments of this video. Kindly, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you're a returning subscriber, please press that notification bell so that whenever I post a new video, you are notified. So thank you so much, and see you in my next video.